I think one of my favorite phenomenons in the human experience is the idea that so many great things start out as a joke. If you go into history, there's been so many amazing inventors and creators and artists that just threw an idea out there and they said, what if I did this? What if I made an electric car? What if I tried to jump out of an airplane in outer space with a parachute and land on Earth and survive? Just think about it for a second. In fact, even in our own lives, a lot of the greatest ideas have just come from whimsical pitches that we give our friends and family, and then something sticks. And I think the reason why this happens is because if we allow ourselves to go into our unadulterated, our most innocent, vulnerable state, we can actually go back to our inner child, the person that we started out as on this planet. Even though it sounds like and it feels like we're cracking a joke about this idea, the reality is that there's all truth in humor. A lot of the times when we do throw out ideas out there, even if they're a joke, they're rooted in reality. So my story here that started out as a joke was when I was interviewing someone on my podcast, Connection Loop, and he was a book publisher. So I decided to play the role of someone pitching their book to a publisher because that's a scene right out of a TV show. It's like Shark Tank for authors. What a great opportunity to get a captive audience with a publisher and then pitch them an idea for a book that I want to write to see if they'll potentially pick up the book. So check out the clip.
I have written one book. It's on Amazon. It's called Click Record.
Yep.
And it was all based on conversations from this podcast. But let's just pretend like I've never written a book before.
Okay.
And I've got a concept and I want to pitch you because you are a publisher. So I'm going to pitch you on this, and I would love to receive brutally honest feedback from you as to how I can go through the process of either continuing on the direction that I'm in or going in a different direction and eventually potentially, working a deal out with you and your publishing company. So ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. One of the fields that I have studied extensively is this idea of the parasocial relationship. And the reason why I've done that is because I'm the CEO of a software company where people create these asynchronous videos. 70,000 people have signed up since we started, and we've seen millions of videos get created with our software where one person is communicating a message to another person asynchronously. And then as a result of that engagement, there is a relationship that's being created, a parasocial relationship. Okay. So this is what we study constantly. You mentioned know, like, trust. The biggest issue that we're all trying to solve in business, this book is going to be very story driven. So I want to share very specific stories, but there's also going to be a lot of neuroscience, not geeky neuroscience, interesting neuroscience, so that we can actually understand what things look like from other people's perspective and how we can tap into this idea of empathy and putting other people first. And I am looking for a publisher. So Vince, that was my pitch. What do you think?
Nice. Well, first of all, it's one of those things where you literally pitch things that I'm super passionate about. So that always makes it very difficult because I'm completely biased already. I love neuroscience. I'm obviously a storyteller by trade anyway. So I love storytelling, any story-driven kind of element of this. But also the parasocial relationships is something that genuinely fascinates me.
So here's the thing about this book. The idea of the parasocial relationship is something that I've been absolutely intrigued with since I started Dub. And I think the reason why this is the case is because video is such a phenomenal way to build a relationship with someone. The problem is when I started Dub, I didn't know that it was called a parasocial relationship. I didn't know that if we watch Oprah Winfrey on her show one or many times, that we feel like we know Oprah Winfrey. I didn't know that that was called a parasocial relationship. And just to quickly define what my interpretation of the parasocial relationship is, it's basically when we see media for an individual, like video, and we feel like we know that person. We've built a parasocial relationship. And what I started to realize as I was studying this topic of the parasocial relationship is that there's not a great deal of information about it, despite the fact that video is everywhere. Think about it. Some of the people that we spend the most time with are actually video personalities, people on YouTube or characters on TV shows or recurring characters that we've seen in movies for decades, like James Bond. The amazing thing about these parasocial relationships is that they can even go through complete different incarnations, like James Bond or Mission Impossible. It's the same character, but a completely different person. The power of the parasocial relationship is weird. Now, on that podcast with Vince, I'm not sure if he was just being nice since he was on my podcast, but I'd like to think that I did see some genuine interest from him. And every time I've pitched this idea of the parasocial relationship to someone, they've been intrigued by it. I mean, even the word parasocial has a ring to it. Doesn't it just look like it should appear on the cover of a book? It has enough of an intriguing vibe to it, but at the same time, it sounds familiar. Parasocial. We've heard those words so many times before. So here it is. I've decided decided to write my second book after the book Click Record, which is my first book, to talk about the idea of the parasocial relationship. The idea that we can create meaningful relationships that turn into real business based on a relationship just like this one, where you're watching me on video, and then if you have a video, I can watch yours. In fact, that would be a synchronous parasocial relationship. But now this just sounds like technical jargon. Now, what I'm gonna focus on this book is, number one, the humanity of the parasocial relationship. The fact that if we can look at the people in their eyes, we can actually build trust, because trust is one of the biggest problems on the internet or even in humanity right now. Stranger danger. We've just been taught to learn that if someone new comes into our life, that we have to put our guard up, that whatever they're saying, even if it sounds great, is probably too good to be true. And if they're saying something that's slightly questionable, it's probably the worst that it could mean. In fact, one time I had met a guy and I had introduced him to someone to potentially do work with. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, how are things going?" And he said, "Things are great until he does something weird." And I laughed about it. It was almost like he was expecting for that guy to do something weird. And whether that results in something weird like a self-fulfilled prophecy, or a certain percentage of people just do weird things, it doesn't matter. The idea is that most people go into relationships with apprehension, with pause, with cynicism. And this book, Parasocial, is going to teach people how to overcome that issue, how to genuinely build trust through the parasocial relationship of doing videos just like this one to make meaningful relationships. And here is the best thing. The parasocial experience through technology is infinitely scalable. One of my favorite YouTubers is Rick Beato, not just because I'm a musician, but also because he is a master storyteller. And when he starts sharing a story, it's hard to actually click stop because you want to see where the story goes. One of the biggest things that I will talk about in the Parasocial book is the idea that storytelling is how human beings communicate. In fact, neurologically speaking, when someone shares a story to a listener, something occurs which is called neural mirroring, which means the person that's listening is actually firing neurons in a very similar way as the storyteller. And in fact, the listener's brain is continually giving it chemicals so that it can stick around for the ride, like dopamine and adrenaline. And those chemicals are what allow us to stay on the journey of the story and to ultimately fulfill our story with the ending of the story, the completion or the incompletion of the arc. And that form of storytelling via the lens of the parasocial relationship is where our entire future is going. The way that companies communicate with people and the way that people communicate with people. So thank you for watching this video, and consider subscribing to this channel if you haven't already done so. And leave a comment below if there's something that you'd like for me to reference in my new upcoming book, Parasocial.